Thanks for coming out and watching the oxymoronic Reddit Professional Show, where I showcase the best and worst of the internet. Here I comment on brilliant and hilarious comment chains regarding dumb shit on the internet for you to enjoy. Make sure to subscribe, hit the little bell button so that you get notifications every time we come up with a new video. Enjoy this week's show.
Serious, scientists of Reddit, what is something you desperately want to experiment with but will make you look like a mad scientist? I want to take DNA from infamous serial killers like Dahmer or Albert Fish or the like, clone them, then have the baby raised in a normal, supportive, loving family. I'd study the kids all through adulthood to see how much is nurture and how much is nature. I want to do a long-term case study on children's microbiome. It would start with samples of their mother's microbiome, and then when the child is first born, get a sample of theirs, compare it, and continue comparing the two samples throughout breastfeeding versus bottle feeding. Also, get a detailed comparison of how the microbiome changes after vaccinations, sickness, antibiotics. I would basically study every single poop this child has, their eating habits, their health conditions, any medications, vaccinations, etc. for years. But people want privacy, and most wouldn't want to commit to keeping such an accurate accounts of their child's food health activities, so it's likely that even if I did this study, it would be difficult to prove all variables were accounted for. And with all the variability, I would need many, many children. The end goal is to see how our microbiome changes throughout your childhood, and note when you may be more susceptible to things depending on the type of microflora you have. Everyone has a different ratio, so essentially if we can harness the individual's capability to unique flora, we could find a whole new way to tackle illnesses and preventatives for sicknesses that would have significantly less side effects than many other medications. The idea stems from others studying the microbiome and finding that certain ratios of microflora can cause you to get over illnesses quicker when combined with the right medicine, and also help digestive tracts to regulate better. But so far these tests are being done with cancer patients. I think if we're able to see how children are affected, it may bring less possibilities of cancer and other illnesses down the road, as well as a faster recovery time. To be honest, that sounds cool. I don't think it's against anything to do it. It would just take too much time. I experiment on ancient coins. Museums are generally against me doing a full compositional analysis, as that would involve me dissolving the whole coin in acid, but it sure would tell us a lot more than not. It's generally a bummer how many kinds of analyses are destructive, though I do remember doing a cool experiment in intro chemistry to determine silver content through neuron activation. A lot easier to do when there's a reactor under the psych building. I'm a physician, and I would love to see how far the placebo effect really goes. For those who are not familiar, the placebo effect is an unexplained phenomena where people who take medications that aren't real but they believe are real have an actual measurable effect on their illness. People with depression who take sugar pills report feeling happier. People with pain who take sugar pills report a decrease to their pain, etc. I've seen even crazier ones where people think they're having surgery for their bad knee, but the docs just put them under, make an incision on their knee, do nothing, sew them back up, and the patients report improvement to their bad knee. So part of me just wants to explore this crap to its full extent. Can we treat chronic illnesses like arthritis, lupus, and bipolar disorder with just placebos? What about viral illnesses? Can you imagine if someone's HIV viral load decreased while they're eating Skittles thinking it's a new miracle drug? But it's pretty much just fantasy. You'd have to take two groups of HIV positive individuals, give one real medicine and the other one Skittles, and this is profoundly unethical. A friend of my mom's basically attempted this. One of her work colleagues suggested it. She's a nurse, and basically her partner was having problems in the bedroom, so she told her to make him take these. They were mints that were distinctively resembled a certain drug. Basically, she gave them to him, and voila, the mints worked. She couldn't bring herself to tell him that they were just mints. I would like to try and lengthen my telomeres and see how that affects my personal aging. Long story short, cancer. I would like to clone myself. Nature versus nurture. Sorry dude, you can have as many kids as possible with one woman, but you cannot clone yourself. Can't do it even once. Identical twins is totally fine also. I'm where you're at, ethically. I can't see a compelling reason why we shouldn't. In fact, my best guess is that it has already been done, just not revealed out of fear of a PR nightmare. Experiments with social isolation intrigue me. Raise a child with no language and see what happens. No contact. Wild children give us some insights, but also a sample of the kind of trauma this can produce. Completely and undeniably unethical, incredibly cruel, but so intriguing. I want to work on genetically modifying the genes that control our active cones in our eyes. Specifically, I want to try to activate a tertiary cone in the eyes of dogs so they can see infrared light just like snakes can. In simpler terms, we could make rescue dogs that have infrared vision to help locate missing people or recover people in natural disasters. In even simpler terms, I want to make heat-seeking dogs. I'm imagining heat-seeking dogs being created for important rescue missions, but ending up just being able to find the warmest lap to lay on. I want drug Olympics, where everyone using something to enhance performance. To see true limit of humans. Have participated in the ketamine Olympics for many years now, which just involves everyone taking a bunch of K and trying to do basic physical activities. Not exactly what you're referring to, but had some pretty fun results. I'd want to know how long it'd take a group of children raised to puberty to figure out intercourse. I'm sure they'd figure out masturbation on some level. But how long would it take them to figure out tap A into slot B? The kids could be raised about as normal as possible, but with any mentioning of intercourse and reproduction completely removed. There would be no shame or deterrent while they figure it out. Like the caretakers wouldn't tell them, we don't do that, if they found that one was masturbating, or two consenting teenagers were touching each other. There would be some kind of explanation with trying to encourage that type of stuff in private instead of around the others. I'm just curious how intercourse is kind of instinctual in other animals. It doesn't really seem that way with us. We learn from so many different sources nowadays that we don't need to figure it out ourselves. We have the internet, friends, peers, maybe parents, books, maybe health class. What would it be like if we just didn't teach, explain, acknowledge it, and see how long it would take for them to figure it out themselves? I wouldn't say mad scientist, but medical privacy laws get in the way of a lot of incredibly useful research. Everything has to be so de-identified and confidential that it makes doing any sort of large-scale statistics nearly impossible. You have to make a ton of assumptions because you can't know many details. If I had full access to everyone's medical records, we could probably fix a whole lot of crap. The typical discovery and clinical testing of pipeline of a pharmaceutical looks something like this. Cell culture is greater than rodent models, which is greater than other animals, primates, rabbits, etc., which is greater than humans. If at any step the drug fails the test, either for toxicity or efficacy, the potential drug is nixed. And this process of discovery and clinical testing can take up to 10 years at the cost of billions of dollars. What happens if your model systems can't fully recapitulate the human disease phenotype? So what happens if you've got a drug that might work really well in the human, but we never know because it gets trashed because there's no response in the mouse model? Now, I completely understand the ethical concerns with testing on human subjects from the get-go, but if you ask me to don my mad scientist lab coating goggles, I'd try to push for earlier testing on human subjects. Yeah, guinea pigs are allergic to penicillin, so if they were used for testing, penicillin would have been rejected. Twins have very similar DNA. If raised exactly the same way without interaction with each other, would they make the same choices? There have been studies done where separated twins could choose the same career, marry a woman by the same name, and maybe even call their kids by the same names. It was crazy specific. Use the milk from Orb Spiders. They mix the DNA of Orb Spiders with goats at University of Wyoming to build a better dental filling. They hypothetically last exponentially longer, which bond to tooth as an organic substance and are stronger than Teflon. It would also be minimally invasive as to set the groundwork for more invasive medical applications such as knee replacements. If you fund me, I know the Orb goat and dental guys. I'd never do the experiment, but it's hard to overstate how helpful it would be to have a large-scale longitudinal data on different chemotherapeutic drugs or drug cocktails affecting the evolutionary trajectory of tumors. The problem is that in order to study it, you'd need to, 1, give a large number of people experimental or substandard care, which is highly unethical, 2, perform serial surgeries even when they aren't medically necessary in order to collect tissue samples from the tumors, and since every surgery carries with it some risk, this is also highly unethical. I'm a chemist, and the answer is anything. Biophysicists here would love to investigate CRISPR technology in vivo cancer patients using the technology to block cleavage from occurring at a specific DNA site. I have studied this in vitro, but experimenting in a live human being could be risky waters. Modifying my butane torch to create a longer stream of fire. It'd basically be a lightsaber but made of fire. Animal or human hybrids. I'm not a professional scientist in this field, but electrostimulation as a means of regrowing limbs sounds pretty interesting, and I'd love to see the effects on humans. If I recall correctly, one of the problems with that is that the wound site must be kept fresh, and humans bleed out too quickly if their wounds aren't able to clot, which would interrupt the regrowth. I'd love to study language development, e.g., stick a bunch of babies on a remote island without outside influence and document how they learn to communicate. Human babies are not self-sufficient like wild animal offspring. They'll most definitely die without help. Transferring consciousness to a computer so we can live forever. Or reproductive cloning so everyone can have their own organs for transplantation. I mentioned this in stem cell class one day, and I've been the weird girl since. I'm an InfoSec guy. Do security researchers count as scientists yet? And I'd love to do social engineering experiments. But they're either illegal or immoral. I want to create miniature elephants. Through ingenious genetic manipulation, I'd be able to miniaturize any living mammal. And yeah, I know there's a South Park reference and also a Jurassic Park, the book, reference. Mostly I want a cuddly mini fant that I can socialize as a lovely companion. And while spiking municipal water supplies to shrink the general population and go Godzilla on their butts. That's what you get for making fun of my homemade pie, Karen. I'd like to raise babies in various planned conditions, such as without any adult human interaction, without language, indoors only, with different concepts of a family unit, with different concepts of gender roles, and many more, without any adult human interaction. I can save everyone a bit of time on this one. The baby dies. Use of Multilead venom for things or variations of it. Multilead are velvet ants or cow killers, but their venom, while very, very painful, has an LD50 of like 71 milligrams per kilogram, meaning it takes a crap load to kill something. It could be the wave of a very good local anesthetic that would make it very hard to overdose on. Well, I'm not exactly a scientist, just a student studying IT, but I'm still really interested in speciation and evolution. I remember watching a documentary about Hiroshima, I think, and how the insects have went through about 40 generations, so they have adapted to the point where they can filter out radiation, but the horses in the area are filled with it because they haven't had much generations in the radiation. So basically I want to introduce mice, mainly because they reproduce fast, into different environments that slowly become harsher and harsher in an attempt to make them evolve. Like I want to make them completely aquatic, where they no longer need land and are able to live off of seaweed, or where their back legs become basically like a kangaroo that can jump really high to get around. Use targeted injections of virally encoded opsins, channel rhodopsin, etc., and some simple signal to light converters to get ESP. See into the UV or infrared? Yeah, why not? Take in Wi-Fi based on data or EMF data. Cool, let's do it. Anything you can build a detector for, if reasonably small, you could then encode in some area of your brain. Could also swap in and out the detector as needed. Going into the dark? Let's go for some IR. Going for a hike in the woods? How about some inbuilt GPS? Transhumanism. I want to see how a heavier push towards prosthesis and the like. I have a healthy interest in immortality. The moment my consciousness can be put into a computer, I'm doing it. Heck, I'll settle for brain in a jar like in Fallout. Biologist here, and I want to develop an artificial system to grow a baby outside the womb. The initial test would involve a donor uterus, like from a pig or primate, unless we can get a healthy one from a human hysterectomy that would be connected to an artificial blood supply. This blood supply would be circulated through the 37C incubator using a pump to mimic the heartbeat. As the embryo develops, different chemicals will be pumped into the bloodstream and maintain appropriate levels of HCG, estrogen, progesterone, oxygen, and nutrients. I would also need to develop a way to efficiently filter out waste. If we could robotize this process, you could keep it running for 9 months and develop a fully healthy baby without destroying your body. This would also eliminate things like fetal alcohol syndrome and other negative effects of poor diet or drug use during pregnancy. Of course, having said all that, it's highly unethical to test on humans and probably shouldn't be done. Also very difficult to get all the chemicals and blood composition right. Astronomer here. I would really love to get a hunk of neutron star and bring it back to Earth and study it. Neutron stars are, as the name implies, essentially a ball of neutrons where the amount of mass in the sun is squeezed into the size of a city. This means they're extremely dense, well beyond the labs on Earth, and thus we don't know much about their properties and how they work. For example, a small fraction of neutron stars give off a beam of radiation, which we see it roared around, so we call them pulsars. What actually gives off the radio beam in the first place? No one really knows. It probably has something to do with magnetic fields in a young neutron star, and we have found a class called magnetars where the magnetic field would kill you if you got within 1,000 kilometers of one. But yeah, no one has a clue how those magnetic fields got so strong either. So in conclusion, if anyone has an idea on how to get me some rocket tech to visit one in an evening, 60s cartoon villain style, let me know, because I am so gonna go get a neutron star. I work mainly with snake venom, but my friend called me and told me his brother-in-law knows a guy that harvests scorpion venom. It is prohibitively expensive normally, but this guy insisted you didn't have to go through the normal process of acquiring it. So I am imagining a sweatshop situation with various containers of scorpion venom. I feel like buying and possessing an old milk jug of scorpion juice would make me seem mad, to say the least. I want to put an ecosystem of animals on their own island, but feed them and see if they continue to hunt or start using civil behavior. Stem cells, frick morals, frick where the cells came from, frick religious objections. Can I fix a person who had a stroke and has had their body paralyzed? In the immortal words of Peter Griffin, why are we not funding this? Grafting artificial muscles, even though I don't have any qualifications and crap, learning on the job.
If you enjoyed this week's effective way to waste time, hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. If you are enjoying the series, leave me a comment below. A special shout out to the content creators. You frickin' rock.